For most Americans, tariffs aren't something we've had to think about, discuss, or understand in a very long time. President Trump used them to some degree during his first term and then talked about them a lot during the campaign last year. But if this next chart is any indication, a lot of people still aren't sure how tariffs work or what they might mean for them. This is a chart with data gathered from Google Trends, which measures the popularity of search terms within Google. It's presented on a scale from 0 to 100, with the higher the number, the more searches being done on the topic. Other than a couple of spikes during Trump's first term, the number of tariff-related searches has been pretty unremarkable. Obviously, that has changed more recently. We can only cover so much in a short amount of time, but we do think we can provide some perspective and maybe answer some of the big picture questions. First, just from a historical perspective, this is not the first time the US has imposed tariffs on the goods coming from other countries, but it has definitely been a while. This is the average tariff rate going back to the 1930s and shows that tariffs haven't really been used to any meaningful degree since the 60s, and obviously the period during the 30s was even more pronounced. We did get a bit of clarity on April 2nd as the administration revealed its tariff rates for various countries, but considering they've also said they plan to be flexible, I don't think anything can be considered written in stone or finalized. Plenty of uncertainty will remain. The overall point, however, stands that tariffs are said to be a more meaningful policy tool than they have been in a very long time. Okay, so now one of the big questions. How does this all work? Who is paying the tariff? And what does the administration hope to accomplish by enacting the tariffs? In other words, what's the end game? The simplest way to think about tariffs is that they are a tax on goods imported from other countries, and it's the companies that buy or bring the foreign goods into the country that pay that tax to the US government. That's probably the aspect that's been most misunderstood or mischaracterized. It's not actually the other country that is paying the tariff or the tax, at least not directly. An everyday example would be avocados coming from Mexico. When a company like Kroger, Target, or Whole Foods purchase produce that is subject to a tariff, then they are the ones that make the tariff payment to the government. Once that tariff has been paid and the good has entered the country, then the company in possession of that good can decide to pass along all, some, or none of that additional cost to their customers. Historically, economists have assumed that some or most of that additional cost will be passed along to the end consumer, which is why most economists assume tariffs will ultimately be inflationary. If tariffs are generally assumed to be inflationary, then the obvious question is, why would they be a central part of the president's economic vision? The basic idea is that the tariffs would incentivize more companies to produce their goods domestically, helping to grow the US economy, protect jobs, and raise tax revenue. There are other aspects at play here too. While most assume President Trump does indeed plan on enacting tariffs, they are also clearly a negotiating tool or tactic. Despite the fact that it isn't actually the Chinese, Mexican, or Canadian governments paying the tariffs directly, those governments understand the negative impacts those tariffs have on their economies. So in addition to hopefully boosting the US economy in the long term, President Trump is also looking to use the tariffs as leverage to get other concessions or things of value from some of those other countries. In the case of China, Mexico, and Canada, for example, he's demanding that they do more to stop the flow of migrants and illegal drugs into the US. We hope that helps with some of the history and basics on tariffs and what the administration is aiming for with their use. Stick around for part 2, where we look closer at the potential economic and inflation impacts. As always, thank you for watching. If you have questions or would like to talk about your personal wealth management needs, please contact us at the number or email shown at the close of this segment.